quite a number of people have called to try and get me to explain why it appears there's a certain the focus is on Gifty Oware Mensah when she's not the boss and NSS, and the fact that there's the director himself, that's Osiasibi.
Yeah.
And so what has happened to ultimate, responsibility, and so people want to understand why here. And I've just read a story about her detention at the NIB and her subsequent release and so on. So, Hamza, can you hazard any guess as to why the focus on Gifty Oware Mensah?
Good morning to my brother. And of course, our charity girls out there. Moro,
yeah.
It is, I do not think that I share in that concern. But
okay.
There seems to be much attention on our sister. The reality is that, you see, in this field of politics, you more or less drive the needed attention on yourself as an active political player. And if you look at those who have managed their place over the years, as far as the deputy positions are concerned, I think that she has so far been the most popular, largely because of the nature of her politicking. I am not saying that her politicking is one that should be condemned, but clearly, she's been a leading member of the New Patriotic Party in terms of canvassing for votes in the last election, and to a very large extent, she's been quite vociferous when it comes to propagating the policies of the NPP. So within the politics of the NPP, I'm sure that she is much more popular than the likes of Ohiniba? Ohinijan, who also happens to Osonoba,
yes,
who also happens to be a deputy director of the NSA. So clearly, I think that it has nothing to do with special interest by the state agencies in her person. What seemed to be driving that interest largely emanates from her own personality and her activeness as far as our political landscape is concerned. For me, that is what I see.
Okay.
What I know, as a matter of fact, is that the state institutions are going about their investigative mandates. They have invited Osonoba. They have invited, I'm told, they have invited many other people who are in one way or the other connected to the NSS scandal. So her invitation is not novel. It's just part of the investigative process. And you also need to know, probably because of the fact that she was out of the country and people were of the view that she was trying to abscond from the investigative processes, that probably also generated some kind of interest in her person. But to a very large extent, I think that we should allow the state institutions to work and be convinced that at the end of the day, whatever report is going to come out would inform the Attorney General as to how to proceed with the said case. But this is clearly in line with what the NDC promised. We indicated from day one that we would do everything within our power to ensure accountability, because we know that in rebuilding the economy, Ghanaians would want to see accountability on the part of those who led us here. And if we fail to do so, we would have a tough time convincing the Ghanaian people to support our policies and ride with us on this tedious journey of resetting our country and, most importantly, putting our economy back on track. So for me, I think that we should not belabor the point. She just happens to be one of the subjects of interest as far as this investigation is concerned. And our institutions are doing what they need to do to ensure that we get to the bottom of this troubling, unfortunate dissipation of state resources by people who are mandated to man our state institutions. But this should also constitute a wake-up call to the many young appointees by His Excellency John Dramani Mahama. You see, when they say that when dry bones are mentioned in Proverbs, old women ordinarily become uncomfortable. So for many of those who have been given the opportunity to serve, they should know that in the future, they will be called upon to account as far as their stewardship is concerned. And that is the more reason why, as members of the National Democratic Congress, mandated or favored to serve, we must do everything in our power to leave a legacy that will not only make our appointing authority proud, in the unlikely event that we lose power in the next 12 or 16 years, but ourselves and our families. That must not be lost on any appointee. What is happening to the MPP today is something that can afford our current appointees, and they must take a cue from it and know that they have been sent to these institutions not to engage in business as usual, take advantage of state resources, but they are sent there to be active members of the desire to more or less bring about reasonable change in our country and workable one at that. So for me, it is not just about the NPP alone, it's a double-edged sword. Those of us who are mandated to lead must be mindful of what is likely to befall us if we do not discharge our responsibilities.
Do you think that this, for you, brings to the fore this age-old conversation which keeps coming up about the interaction or the engagement with the public, which is from these state investigative institutions? What kinds of engagements they should be having with the public and updating them on some of these activities that they engage in, so that the public gets to know about why somebody has been invited, and even what has happened so far with investigations, so that people are not in doubt as to exactly what is happening to who. I mean, somebody has my number, the person has called me. The person doesn't have anybody, perhaps doesn't have anybody's number to the NIB, and so is also in 6s and 7s as to exactly what is happening. Do you think that this brings this whole conversation to the fore? And I don't know where you stand, whether institutions like NIB, National Security and Co. should have a PR unit to sort of carry and to update, to carry the Ghanaians along and to update them on the activities.
Absolutely. When it comes to the establishment of PR units, I share in that concern. It is important for them to have their own outfit that would be more or less mandated to engage with the Ghanaian public. But you see, we are dealing with investigations. We must also be careful about how willing we are to open our security agencies to media scrutiny. I am sure that those who have been extended invitations, the letters inviting them would have given them a fair idea of the questions that the NIB intends to ask. And they are also given an opportunity to appear with their lawyers. That should suffice from where I stand, because it is not an investigation targeted at the whole country. There are some specific individuals who have been invited. It's just like the Ghana Police Service. From the CID unit, from time to time, they call people for investigations. They are not obligated in any way to make public the reason why they are inviting Mr. A or B, but that person would have known. So we should be careful in terms of how we expand the frontiers of so-called freedom of disseminating information. But from where I sit, I think what should be our focus is, if you are calling for the establishment of PR units, simply to engage with the public in terms of the organizational identity or activities, I do not have a problem with that. But when it comes to specific cases of investigations, that is where I'm a bit uncomfortable, because it is not every information that you want to be out there, especially when you are still carrying out an investigation. Because if care is not taken, you would have succeeded in damaging the reputation of those subjects or of those people who constitute subjects of your investigation. And maybe at the end of the day, you may not deem it appropriate to proceed with such investigations. So I'm sure that they are also a bit reluctant to do so, largely because of the perception that might pose to subjects of their investigation. So it is a discussion we can continue to have from where we sit, but let us be a bit cautious, especially when it comes to issues of investigations. I am a bit reluctant to recommend that the NIB or national security should be engaging the media daily, letting them know the state of the extent they have gone as far as these investigations are concerned. The most important thing is that if the subject knows why he's invited, he or she is invited, and has been afforded an opportunity to appear with a lawyer, that should be sufficient at this stage for me.
Richard, 2 questions. 1, have you also wondered why Gifty? And 2, must we get to a point where an investigative institutions like the NIB should be periodically updating Ghanaians on these kinds of investigations, so that it leaves nobody in doubt as to why somebody is being picked up and for what, and what has happened to the person, so that you don't leave vacuum for all kinds of speculations and misinformation and disinformation and so on?
Good morning, Moro, and to your viewers this morning. I think that it's an interesting question, your second one. I think certainly there must be a way to let the public know, because we all have interest in these matters, to the extent, of course, if you have a PR unit, they know what information to disclose, what not to disclose, so they'll be able to manage the information better. And that will keep everybody at ease, and people would know what is going on. But I am worried or perhaps concerned about the use of NIB, predominantly for these investigations. I prefer maybe the police would have done a better job, because and then probably a bit more calming for the public, because we relate to the police every day, and so it is not a novelty to be invited by the police. The norm is there. But a sudden injection of NIB into our space in the manner it's going on actually is creating some concern for people. And I think that just like we would want the military to be less visible, I think NIB, they do very important work. We should not make them too familiar with the public by allowing them to do their behind-the-scenes work that ultimately improve our public safety and security, but not necessarily in our faces the way it is happening. It's not as if it's wrong, but I think that it will over time make them too familiar and maybe not good for the image or the performance MO of the institution. So for me, to that extent, I'd say that the government takes a second look at its use of NIB to pursue these investigations. But that's their decision to make. As a concerned citizen, I think that it will be better if we have the police do it. And if I were a police officer, I feel my role usurped somewhat. But that's not a point to quibble about. But I think that for good reason, we should use the police better than the NIB. Gifty, I wouldn't say that they are targeting her per se, but she worked there. She had a responsibility. She discharged there. The orders of or the structure of the institution may be clear to us, but maybe the workings at the institution perhaps gave her a certain responsibility, which responsibility scope or area is under investigation. So even though she was a deputy, maybe a special task that was given to her is somewhat the focus of that investigation. So she may appear to be targeted or be the one center of the investigation, even though the boss is there. But I see that perhaps will be the reason. But my concern would be that the government pursue the issue and not a person, and ultimately respecting the rights, civil and human rights of these individuals that are being investigated for what work they were supposed to have been done by them for the people of Ghana. And if that is done, then would look forward to a fair process where people's rights are respected, where the investigations are done that leads to prosecutions, not persecutions. When that is done, I think that all Ghanaians will all be confident in the outcome. As a party, we appreciate the accountability system. We are advocates of that. And so we believe that people must serve the interest of Ghana, but when people end up in office serving their interest, we are clear in our minds that that's not something would contain us as a party. But the only thing we make note of to the government is to do so according to law and ensure that people are not abused and needlessly harassed, and that they are taken through the process as established by law. And in the end, the results will be accepted by us and by all. I think that's really what all of us sign on to coming into the public space, that we'll do our job diligently and according to law.